Hi, Brady Barrows with the RRDi. I'm going to talk about phenotypes and variants of rosacea. The history of classifying rosacea began in 2002 when the National Rosacea Society came out with its expert committee who began classifying rosacea into 4 subtypes and 1 variant. And here's the list. And during this period from about 2002 till 2016, a total of 14 years, there were some other proposed subtypes like neurogenic rosacea, neuropathic rosacea, glandular rosacea were proposed, but they never really gained much acceptance. When this report came out in 2002, the expert committee stated in its report, quote, "As a provisional standard classification system, it is likely to require modification in the future as the pathogenesis and subtypes of rosacea become clearer and as its relevance and applicability are tested by investigators and clinicians." So the committee did acknowledge that probably things would change with this classification. When this classification came out, it wasn't without controversy. A noted expert on rosacea, Dr. Albert Kligman, had this to say about it. Quote, "In my view, this is a vast oversimplification which will not solve the diagnostic dilemmas that confront us. I see no reason not to give equal noslogic status to granulomatous rosacea, Rosacea conglobata, Rosacea inversa, formerly called Pyoderma phacellae, Rosacea fulminans, edematous rosacea, which is a devastating variety, or combinations with seborrheic dermatitis, lupus, erythematosus, acne vulgaris, and still other variants. Reducing the classification to 4 subtypes does little to clarify and eliminate the inherent complexities of this mysterious disease." End quote. Dr. Kligman has since passed away, but his insight into this helps us to understand why we have moved on to phenotypes. Because the beginning of this was with what was called the ROSIE panel, a group of physicians in 2010. ROSIE stands for Rosacea International Expert Group. They wrote in a report, quote, "Classification of rosacea into stages or subgroups with or without progression remained controversial." And this is what the report said, quote, "The group suggested a rational, evidence-based approach to treatment for the various symptoms of the condition. In daily practice, this approach might be more easily handled than prior subtype classification. In particular, since patients often may show clinical features of more than one subtype at the same time." The NRS Expert Committee even acknowledged in 2002, it says, quote, "As knowledge increased, it is hoped that the definition of rosacea may ultimately be based on causality rather than on morphology alone." So what we learned from this is that the subtype classification is based on morphology, okay, which is basically based upon form and structure, or outward appearance, shape, structure, color, pattern, size. All right? So now a little phenotype 101 is in order at this point. What is a phenotype? A phenotype, quote, "The term covers the organism's morphology or physical form and structure, its developmental processes, its biochemical and physiological properties, its behavior, and the products of behavior." Now that's what Wikipedia says about phenotype. But what's interesting is in its article on nosology, it says In a nosological sense, the term phenotype can be used in clinical medicine for speaking about the presentation of a disease. So basically, the nutshell version is nosology goes deeper into disease than morphology alone. So what happened was in October 2016, in an EPUB ahead of print, in a prestigious journal, the British Journal of Dermatology, October 8th, 2016, it's the Roscoe panel proposed the phenotype classification of rosacea. This panel was comprised of physicians from all over the world. Now, the panel said, quote, "The panel recommended an approach for diagnosis and classification of rosacea based on disease phenotype." So I'd like to show you that the RRDi, when they did this in October 2016, the RRDi accepted this, and they were the first rosacea nonprofit to recognize the phenotypes of rosacea. And they are 6, and here they are. The 6 phenotypes listed by the RRDi. Now, let's see how the previous subtype classification based on morphology is different than the 6 phenotypes based on nosology. Look at this image and see the comparison. On the left, you'll see the 4 subtypes of rosacea. Now, on the right, you'll see the superior phenotype that splits subtype 1 into 2 phenotypes and adds flushing as a phenotype. Now, why is that? It's because when you split up subtype 1 into 2, they're treated differently because they're different parts of the rosacea disease. Just like flushing which the subtype system doesn't even recognize. Flushing is a big complaint with rosaceans, and you treat that differently. So, that gives you an idea of the superiority. Now, Galderma acknowledged the phenotype classification about a year later in October 2017. And it was followed by others like the Dermatologist, the Medical Independent, the Daily Telescope, Cision, MedEsthetics. Then, in November 2017, which is more than a year later, the NRS came out with its expert committee and acknowledged the phenotype classification. And this was followed by the American Acne and Rosacea Society, who acknowledged the phenotype classification in August 2019. Now, Medscape, it has updated its rosacea page, acknowledging the phenotype classification. A paper came out in 2020 that the Netherlands acknowledges the phenotype classification. And in 2020, the American Academy of Dermatology Association also acknowledged the phenotype classification, as well as clinical, cosmetic, and investigational dermatology, all in 2020. So phenotypes are established. If your physician is still referring to subtypes of rosacea, it's because much of the rosacea clinical papers refers to this older classification that was established in 2002. And some recent papers are still referring to the subtype classification, and they're just simply not up to date. So that's why you keep running into it. Why is the phenotype classification superior? This clinical paper explains, quote, "These practical recommendations are intended to indicate the next steps in the progression from subtyping to a phenotyping approach in rosacea, with the goals of improving our understanding of the disease, facilitating treatment developments, and ultimately improving care for patients with rosacea." We have lots of information on this. We have posts about this, why the phenotype classification is superior. We have another post, phenotype classification uses signs and symptoms better. We have another one on how does the phenotype classification work, and you can read all this. Now let's turn to variants of rosacea. In 2002, the NRS only recognized one variant of rosacea, granulomatous rosacea, also known as lupoid rosacea. And as far as it is known, this is still the only variant recognized by the National Rosacea Society. Now, the RRDi recognizes 13 variants of rosacea. And here is the list that you can read on our website. So, what are variants? What are they? Well, we have a post on the differences between phenotypes, subtypes, and variants if you want to really deep dive into this. But basically, the nutshell version is a variant is manifesting variety or deviation exhibiting variation. So all we have to do is go back to what did the NRS do in recognizing granulomatous rosacea as a rosacea variant. Why did they do that? It's because it's so different. It's a variant of the regular rosacea. And as Dr. Kligman pointed out in 2002 with his paper, there are a number of other rosacea variants that he gives, quote, noslogic status to. And so does the RRDi, with its recognition of these 13 variants. Out of those 13, there are 2 variants, without a doubt, that receives more recognition than the others, and that they are gut rosacea and demodectic rosacea. And if you want to learn more about that, you got to deep dive into that. Now remember, not all rosaceans have every variant, just like not all rosaceans have all 6 rosacea phenotypes. What is good about all this is understanding how rosacea is classified, how there are variants of it. And you can ask your dermatologist questions about what you're learning on the RRDi website. Investigating, doing research on all this. This is for the benefit of rosaceans. Rosaceans helping rosaceans. Everybody at the RRDi suffer from rosacea, and we want to help you, and you can help us. The RRDi has established our website as the premier knowledge base of rosacea data on the internet, and guests only can view about 25% of our rosacea data. You have to join our cause to gain all the knowledge that's on our website and gain access to our huge database of rosacea information. So please, join our cause, and please post in our guest forum some feedback. Hope you enjoyed our presentation on phenotypes and variants of rosacea.